Alright guys, today we're going to be learning about the Iraq War. Go ahead and label your assignments. So the Iraq War consisted of two phases.
But wait!
What?
Why did this even start in the first place?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Tensions were bursting at the seams between the U.S. and Iraq, and relations had long been deteriorating. The most immediate catalyst of the U.S.'s invasion of Iraq could be attributed to the Iraq invasion of Kuwait. U.S. intervention, or Operation Desert Storm, drove the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. After the invasion of Kuwait, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 687, ordering Iraq to destroy all of its weapons of mass destruction. Moreover, the United Nations imposed sanctions against Iraq, primarily to slow or hinder the progression of its lethal arms programs, including the development of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. UN inspections in the mid-1990s uncovered prohibited technology all throughout Iraq. The country's continuous disregard of the UN weapons ban, along with their interference with the inspections, led Bill Clinton to order the bombing of several Iraq military installations. After the bombings, Iraq suspended all cooperation with UN weapons inspectors.
It's over!
In 2002, George W. Bush claimed that the United States' vulnerable state after 9/11, combined with Iraq's alleged continued possession of weapons of mass destruction and terrorist support, made disarming Iraq a priority. On March 17th, seeing that all civil diplomatic efforts between Iraq and the UN Security Council were futile, Bush issued an ultimatum that Saddam should leave Iraq within 48 hours. The leaders of France, Germany, Russia, and other countries objected to this buildup of war. On March 20th, 2003, Bush declared a military operation in Iraq. Its goal was to destroy alleged weapons of mass destruction and to end the dictatorial rule of Saddam Hussein. The attack began when U.S. aircraft bombed the bunker complex in which it was believed that the Iraqi president was to be meeting with senior staff with several precision-guided bombs. This was followed by a series of airstrikes directed against government and military installations, and within days U.S. forces had invaded Iraq from Kuwait in the south. After British and coalition forces overwhelmed the Iraqi army, Iraqi civilians and U.S. soldiers pulled down Saddam's statue in Baghdad's Firdos Square. Bush then announces the coalition's success in Iraq from the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln.
But wait! I don't understand! Why did they announce the operation a success even though they hadn't found Saddam Hussein?
Bush announced the operation a success because the coalition had successfully scattered Saddam's army and thus effectively ridding him of his power, though for 5 months after Bush's announcement, the search for Saddam would continue. Even though U.S. troops feared that Iraqi forces would engage in a scorched earth policy, which was setting fire to oil wells and destroying bridges and dams, little damage was actually done by the retreating forces. In fact, a large majority of the troops chose not to resist invading advances and simply ran. Meanwhile, in central Iraq, units of the Republican Guard, a heavily armed paramilitary group, were deployed to defend the capital of Baghdad. U.S. Army and Marine forces advanced northwestward up the Tigris-Euphrates River. During a momentary pause due to stormy weather, advancement towards Baghdad was temporarily halted. U.S. aircraft inflicted heavy damage on Republican Guard units around the capital. U.S. forces resumed their advance within a week, and on April 4th they took control of Baghdad's international airport. Iraqi resistance, though at times vigorous, was highly disorganized, and over the next several days, Army and Marine Corps units staged raids into the heart of the city. On April 9th, resistance in Baghdad collapsed, and U.S. soldiers took control of the city. On July 22nd, Saddam Hussein's sons, Qusay and Uday Hussein, are killed after a 3-hour firefight with U.S. forces in the northern Iraqi city of Mosul. It is widely believed that the two men were even more cruel and ruthless than their notorious father, and their death was celebrated among many Iraqis. Uday and Qusay were 39 and 37 years old respectively when they died. Both were said to have amassed considerable fortunes through their participation in illegal oil smuggling. An Iraqi source informed the 101st Airborne Division that several suspects, including Qusay and Uday, numbers 2 and 3 on the U.S. Central Command's most wanted list, were hiding in a residence at the northern edge of the city. Almost a month after Saddam's two sons are killed, the vigorous search for the dictator is still ongoing. On August 19th of 2003, however, disaster struck in Baghdad. A brand new cement mixer truck driven by a suicide bomber approached the Canal Hotel building, which was the United Nations headquarters in Iraq at the time. Filled to the brim with explosives, the truck detonated and exploded a gigantic chunk of the building. 22 people were killed, among them
Sergio Vieira de Mello,
the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the head of the United Nations mission in Iraq. Over 150 others were injured in the devastating attack, with most of them being aid workers who would come into Iraq to help reconstruct the country following the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. The attack, although dreadful, triggered an immediate concern in the United Nations security and safety measures. As a result, in 2005, the United Nations Department of Safety and Security, or UNDSS, was created, mandating to lead a collective approach to UN security. On December 13, 2003, U.S. troops decided to act on advice from Saddam's bodyguard and family members, beginning their search around Saddam's boyhood home, Tikrit, in a mission known as Operation Red Dawn. They soon found Hussein in a one-man hole in the ground, his hygiene deteriorated, face unshaven, and hair matted. He didn't resist his capture, and as one member of the troop described, Hussein was, quote, a man resigned to his fate. Despite a prolonged search, weapons of mass destruction were never found in Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. These were the words spoken by L. Paul Bramer, head of the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq, to announce to the world that Hussein had been captured. On December 30th, 2006, he was executed via hanging for his crimes.
Okay, I understand it now. I understand it now.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the head of the United Nations mission in Iraq. Over 150 others were